Hello and welcome to the concluding video in this series about how to run vanilla Apache Kafka 3.0 on Docker and on Kubernetes. So in this particular video series, we were covering how we can deploy vanilla Apache Kafka, the 3.0 version, on Kubernetes and on Docker. Now we run it in several containerized environments, like running it on Docker Compose, running it on Kubernetes in our local environment. But in this particular video, we're going to be covering how to do this in the cloud, specifically on the Azure Kubernetes service. So that's what this video is going to be about. And if you have missed any of the previous videos, please feel free to take a look at the first one that covered this introduction and what we're going to be covering in this series. And that was on Docker Compose, and then the second one was on how to run it in Kubernetes, but using your local Kubernetes deployment like Minikube or what comes with Kind or with the Docker desktop version. So in this particular one, it's going to be very similar. The cluster setup is going to be similar, but the main difference is going to be the environment, and we're going to be doing that on Azure Kubernetes service. So I'm very excited to share this content with you. And like I said in earlier videos, the main objective of this is to get you up and running very quickly without you having to spend too much time trying to figure out how to deploy Kafka locally. Sometimes a lot of people that are trying to get started with Kafka, they spend so much time just trying to get the local environment right, setting up the broker, setting up Zookeeper, and all these different components that are needed to get Kafka running. But in this particular series, our main focus is just showing you different ways you can run Kafka on containers, either using Docker or Kubernetes, whether it be using the local install on your desktop or using what's available in the Azure Kubernetes service in the cloud. So our main objective here is just to get you started very quickly. So if you are new to this particular series, I will encourage you to take a look at the previous ones. But for this particular content, we're going to be focusing on how we can deploy our cluster components on Azure Kubernetes service. And then after that, we're going to show you some commands of how you can check to see if the brokers and the pods are running successfully. And then we'll exploit like how we did in the previous videos. So that's our outline for today's video, and I'm going to get you started right away. But before that, if you are new to my content and my channel, please feel free to subscribe to the channel. And when you do this, it's going to help you to get notifications when new content comes up. You can also follow me on my social media handles. I have Twitter, I have Instagram, and I also have GitHub. And you can also check out my website for content that I have on different areas that are related to event streaming, data engineering, and several content that I think you might find useful. So please feel free to subscribe to this channel and share this video to someone you think would benefit from it. Now, I have a premium course that covers how to process data with open source software. So Apache Kafka is one of the contents in that particular course. And in the future, there will be upcoming content and courses that will be available at the link that I'm putting here. But if you are very interested in the one that has to do with using open source data to process, using open source software to process data, to store data, to aggregate data, you can take a look at the description, and I will have the link to that course on Udemy for you to take a look at. And please feel free to sign up and share feedback once you have done so. And then for this particular content today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking a look at this URL, and the URL for this GitHub repo will be at the description, and you can take a look at it and follow along with me as I'm navigating through the different steps of this particular video. So in our first video, we deployed Kafka in craft mode and in legacy mode on Docker Compose. So that was the first video. In the second video, we covered how to do so using a local Kubernetes environment, which could be Minikube, it could be Kind, it could be what's available through Docker Compose. So that was what we covered in the second video on Kubernetes, but local to your environment. In this particular video, My main focus is going to be on running it on Azure Kubernetes Service in a cloud environment. You're going to see some of the slight differences, like with the storage. There is no storage available locally for you to use in the local environment, but with doing Azure in the cloud, you can leverage some of the persistent storage and disk that is available. The next thing is also networking is slightly different in the cloud. In the local environment, we use node port and cluster IP, but in the Azure environment, we can use the internal load balancer service to navigate between brokers across different ports. So that's some of the differences that we have between running it on Kubernetes locally and running it in Kubernetes in the cloud. So this particular video will be focused on doing it in Azure Kubernetes Service, which is a cloud-based offering that is available via Microsoft Azure. So that's what we're going to be doing in this particular video. And then as soon as we're done with that, we're going to go ahead and explore the cluster like how we did in the previous video. So let's get started with how we're going to set up the environment. So to do this, I'm going to navigate to my cloud deployment. So if you are new, once you get to the environment, you can take a look at instructions for how to set up the Kubernetes cluster. So that guidance is available in this link. And once we have the cluster up and running, like how I do here, we're going to proceed with using Azure Cloud Shell. So to do this, you can go to shell.azure.com and you can use this to interact with your Kubernetes cluster without having to set anything up in your local environment. So I already have my Cloud Shell open here, which I will be using to explore the cluster once we're done. But the Kubernetes cluster is set up. The first thing was the virtual network, and then the cluster itself was deployed so that I can run my Kafka containers inside this environment. So I have this now. The cluster has been set up. The next thing we need to do is we need to deploy the cluster. So here we have in my Cloud Shell, once I check out this code content, what I need to do is I need to navigate to the folder that contains the Helm charts. So Helm is something that can be used to simplify cluster deployments, component deployments on Kubernetes. So I created that chart, those set of charts for you to use in this one tutorial. So we have this now. In my local environment here, I downloaded I checked out and cloned the Kafka in a box repository. So I'm going to navigate to that folder. So let's make this wider so that you can follow along and see what I see. Okay, so we have that. I'm also going to make this one a bit wider. Excuse me. Okay, so maybe I had to be patient a little bit. All right, so we have this set up at the moment, and make sure everything is all set. So we have this set up right now. We are inside the Kafka in a box repo. The next thing, I need to go into the Kubernetes folder, and I need to go into the Helm charts folder. All right, so as you can see here, we have two different sets of Helm charts. We have the first one for running it in the cloud, and we have the other one for running it locally, but we're going to focus on the one in the cloud. So my instruction here, the first thing I need to do is to create the namespace. I've already created this namespace, so you're going to see a message saying that it's already created, but that is the command that you can use to create it. So kubectl create ns, which means namespace, and then you specify river. River is going to be our namespace. So to do that, I run this command. It says that it already exists, so you don't have I did not have to do it, but in your own case, if you're doing this for the very first time, you have to proceed and do that step. So once we have that running, we can have the option of setting up our cluster in legacy mode with Zookeeper, but I want to try doing it in craft mode without Zookeeper. So with craft mode, Zookeeper is not needed, so we can skip that. And then we come to this particular command here. So this here will set up my my brokers for me. So let me go ahead and do that. So we'll come over here, and then we enter this command. So this says upgrade or install. The release is going to be called River Broker, and then we're going to use the charts inside the Azure cloud, and we're going to enable it in craft mode. So we run this command. All right, so now in a few minutes I should be able to see that my pods are up and running. So to do that, I simply run the commands to check for the status of my pods. So the commands to do that is kubectl. I specify the namespace, and then I say get pods. So that is showing me here that I have these pods up and running. Once I have the pods running, the next thing I need to do is we can now go ahead and explore the cluster. So, but before we do that, let us take a look at the different services that we have. So as you can see here, we have 4 different services, 4 external and 4 internal services. The external services allow us to explore the cluster and reach them from outside using these public IPs, and internal services allows us to reach it internally. So at one point we're going to be able to use these names and reach our brokers inside the cluster. So we're about to get started now, but to do that I can pick one of the nodes and I can log into that node and start exploring the cluster. So let me clear this, and then now we're going to be inside the node. So you navigate into the bin folder, and inside the bin folder you see all these different files here, but the first one that we're going to use is going to be the one to check out the cluster. So let's do that. So exploring the cluster in craft mode. Now so we can check out the identifier for the cluster. So to do that, we run this command. Now as you can see here, in this command we had the host name for the broker as localhost. Now what I can do in the cloud is, like you saw earlier, if we run this set of services, we can find out all the different machines that are, all the different nodes that are running. So if we pick node 3 internal and replace that as our host name, we should be able to do the same thing but on a different machine. Remember, right now we are running locally in node 2, but I can also reach out on node 3 and I should be able to get, you know, similar output. So in the cloud you can use the local hosts, and you can also use a different machine or a different node, and that should be reachable using the host name for that node. So all the other items for exploring the cluster should be very similar to what we did before. So now I'm going to proceed with creating some topics. We've already covered the other ones in the previous videos, so please take a look at that. So I've created a first topic here, and then I'm going to go ahead and create another one. So city population is created, country population is going to be created now. Okay, so you're saying that already existed. Now let's try creating something with a replication factor of 4. Remember, I have only 3 brokers in this cluster. So let's see if we can do this. We shouldn't be able to do this because we don't have enough. So it's telling us that we have exceeded the amount of available brokers because only 3 are registered. So to fix that problem, we can reduce this to 3 or less, and that should allow us to be able to create our cluster. Because now the number of available brokers match the replication factor, and that should work. So we've created a couple of topics. Now let's take a look at the topics that we have in the cluster. So I should be able to clear that out, and then if I run this should show me all the topics that I have, and then I can now describe one of them. So if I describe one of the topics, I should be able to see some of the settings for that topic. Okay, so this concludes the demonstration for this particular setup. As you can see, we've walked you through 4 separate installations in craft mode, in legacy mode, running it in Docker Compose, running it in Kubernetes in your local environment. Now we have added the 5th and the 6th option that allows you to run it in the cloud, either in legacy mode or in craft mode. So I really hope that you enjoyed this particular tutorial and you found value in the content that was provided. If you think that it's beneficial to someone else, please feel free to share the content with them as well, and then invite them to watch other videos from the channel. So that was everything I had to offer in this particular content. Please feel free, again, to follow me on all the social media platforms that you see on the screen. You can also subscribe to the channel, because I think once you subscribe, you have access to all the content that I have to share with you, and you also benefit from it and help you in your project or in your learning as well. So I thank you very much for your time today, and I look forward to seeing you in the upcoming videos. Thank you very much. And don't forget to check out my course on Udemy on how to aggregate, store, and process data using open source software. So once you check out the course, please feel free to give me some feedback and let me know what you think about the course. So thank you very much, and that's the last reminder, and I'll see you in the next video.